This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Round Table. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today's guest is Thad McElroy, an author, consultant, and expert witness specializing in AI, marketing, and social media. He has published or worked on over 18 books and 500 articles and consulted on topics including incorporating AI, digital publishing technologies, and beyond. Mr. McElroy, thank you so much for joining me here today at the Round Table.
Thank you, Noah. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Let's jump into it. You have a strong background in publishing and in AI. How did you first become involved in expert witnessing?
That's a good question. I was looking at my files in preparation for our discussion, and it came out of the blue, as I recall. I was working here in San Francisco in the 90s, and there was a complex patent litigation having to do with a printing a device that's used in the printing industry. And it was one that I was familiar with, and they somehow tracked me down. And it was so much fun. So I guess not everybody who's an expert witness thinks of it as fun, but I had a ball on the first one and was just so intrigued with the process. And so from there, I've now been doing it for 30 years.
That's something that I hear pretty often is that expert witnessing can be pretty fun. It can be side work to your regular work. In your case, you are still a working professional who does expert witnessing. There are also, obviously, professional expert witnesses. Tell me about that. What's fun about expert witnessing? Why do you enjoy working as an expert witness?
I tell people that it's sport. It's the ultimate jousting. And it's all based in words. And being an author and a publisher, I love words, of course, and I love using them creatively and expressively, but I use them also as weapons. That's part of their power. And so the expert witnessing is very much involved with words as weapons.
Of course. You are an AI expert. As an expert witness, what is your perception of the fairly nascent technology as a tool for expert witnesses? And we can dig into that, talk about expert witness reporting. We can talk about the way that you have to just communicate with people in general. To what extent should expert witnesses be exploring AI? And what are some of the perils that are involved in using AI?
Let's get the perils out of the way, because everyone gets concerned about those, understandably. But my approach is to say, I don't diminish the perils and I don't diminish the problems. And I like to be then right up front. Yes, there are this problem, this problem, this problem. It could be the end of mankind, for example. And so once you got your head around that, you can either go home, which some people choose to do, or you can say, all right, I understand the perils. Now, what can I do with it? And I do recommend to people that, you get before you dismiss it, find out what it can do that's positive, because we can easily delineate what the risks are. So in terms of the, positive applications for AI throughout the experts, sort of job trajectory or workflow, let's say, it's an amazing tool for research. There's people talking about the hallucination problem, and there isn't a hallucination problem where, you have to fact check what AI gives you, but it's amazing what it gives you. It gives you, responses that you would not find in any other place.
And but before you move on, just for our guests who are not familiar with the hallucination problem, would you mind just in a few words talking about what that is?
What happens, and there was, the famous law case that everyone references where, a lawyer didn't double check what he was getting back from ChatGPT. ChatGPT, because they're language models, they're not search engines, they're not fact engines. They, conjure up language in a way that's coherent and seems, like a factual response. But if they don't have some facts, they'll just make it up. And so it's buyer beware on that stuff.
One of my most recent blogs on for Roundtable Group was an evaluation of different grammar software and kind of grammar assistant and writing assistant software, some of which is aided by AI. And AI tends to be a feature that is a paid feature where you pay for a certain number of prompts or something like that, and it will do exactly what you're saying, kind of evaluate the overall tone or the overall logic, as you stated, or the overall writing of your expert report. And one of the problems that I was running into was, while it did a great job finding a nice professional tone that was simultaneously readable for people who might be laypersons, but it also had the problem of sometimes changing the content in a way that I would be concerned if I was, say, an engineer, or if I was, doing something that was extremely crucial, that exactly what I was saying was being reported exactly in that way. How can experts enjoy the benefits of AI without running into some of the pitfalls of AI?
A great question. I'd love to read your blog post and send me the link, please, and I'll have a look at that. I've studied grammar and spelling checking for a long, long time, and everyone wants to believe that these tools are great. They're not great. They're pretty good. The complexities of the English language are so vast, and you see it even with spell checkers, right? It comes up with just the wrong word, where you think, like, in context, how could you possibly suggest that particular word? And when it comes to grammar, it's far more complex. The challenges that it's facing. It's really not an excellent tool. It's a useful tool. Again, you need to be a very knowledgeable user to detect when it's not being helpful, or when it's suggesting something that's simply incorrect.
So your recommendation would be to use it, but remain vigilant. Is that correct?
Very much so.
Let's back up into some of those phone calls, some of the initial times that when you were not necessarily your very first expert engagements, but let's talk about what you like to discuss on the phone. What are the things that you talk about with your engaging attorney to make sure that you are the right person for the job and that you have all of the information that you need?
Yep. When I thought about that, when I was thinking, how often am I able to get hold of the initial filings prior to the call? You don't always get hold of those filings. If you do, hallelujah, because you're going to be able to be so much more knowledgeable and informed in that first call. But I've had calls where, they gave me just the most scant information. And so you're kind of going into it a bit blindfolded. But my feeling is, again, it's a very competitive marketplace. They're interviewing at least 2 or 3 other experts. So you've got to be thinking, what is it that I know, that is unique? What is my special sauce? And communicate that to them. Either your special sauce has value or it doesn't. You can't control that, but you've got to explain what it is that makes you uniquely skilled.
Do you think that there's a potential pitfall for newer expert witnesses who may really want to take jobs because they might not be flooding their email box at all times, but simultaneously needing to stay in their proverbial lane and making sure that they are the right person for the job? How do you navigate the need to get work with making sure that you only take work that is appropriate to you?
I'm pretty careful about that. I have a lot of faith in the attorneys. I've worked with great people. I've had 1 or 2, losers along the way. Usually they were sole practitioners. But any of the larger firms I've worked with, I've been mostly amazed at the skills and talents. So, I feel they know how to do their side of the job. And if I come on too strong, you're going to see right through that, and I'll seem needy and desperate. I've got to be a little bit aloof in these things, even though, yes, I'd love to get the assignment.
Without naming names, what are some of those issues that you've run into with attorneys be they from smaller firms or just not the, not necessarily being the best attorney that they could be vis-a-vis expert witnesses?
The one I had was so contentious. He could not, there was no way to please this person. And I couldn't tell if it was because he was fronting some of the costs himself, or I'm not sure, but everything I submitted to him was garbage. And, you can't bill me for this. This is just useless, and those ones come along. But that has been the sole practitioners where I've had that kind of a problem.
Speaking of getting paid, do you have any specific terms that you like to make sure that you have in your contract? In other words, do you like to take a retainer? Do you do hourly? Do you do project rates? What are some of the billing concerns and the ways that you deal with them?
I definitely go for retainers because I think that's absolutely essential. If you've got a prospective client that's not willing to pay a retainer, walk away now so you don't get burned later. It's the professional approach, right? It's not unreasonable to request a retainer. I have hourly rates. I think, I don't know. I actually don't talk to my colleagues that much because my colleagues are within my expertise. I'm not part of any expert groups, but I charge, hourly for the research and reporting, a different hourly rate, higher for, any kind of court work, including depositions. Courts are of course, most expensive, as it is for most. And then there's the question of, incidentals. If there's travel, for example, how's that billed? I have a rate for travel as well.
Is that typical? Do you travel a lot for expert witnessing?
As I said that, I'm thinking, do I? I used to. I mean, not so much anymore. Traveling from my bedroom to my living room.
Have you worked in different venues? Have you worked in, either across different states or federal in state or in other different types of venues with different laws?
I've only worked in the US and Canada. I did a couple in Canada. I have worked in multiple states. Usually, when there's travel involved, it has to do with a deposition in a different venue. I had one wonderful client who wouldn't hire me without me flying to Texas on short notice to be interviewed by their client, which was very formal, but it led to a wonderful assignment. So their rigorousness was something that I appreciated.
Are there any issues in crossing a state and having to know a different body of law or anything that expert witnesses need to concern themselves with when working in a venue that's not necessarily the same venue that they're accustomed to working in?
Good question. In my experience, I just leave that to the attorneys. Tell me what I need to know. If they can't supply that information, there's something wrong.
Do you find that expert witnesses should take a more proactive approach in making sure their attorneys do relay any of that important information, or do they typically do that just as a matter of course?
That's again a good question, right? We'd like to say they do it as a matter of course, knowing that sometimes they don't. The one where I really see them getting sloppy is on rehearsals for depositions. They'll cut corners on that, and it comes back to bite me and them. And the last deposition I did was unsatisfactory in the end. And I thought that's because I wasn't properly rehearsed. If they'd given it another 6 hours of rehearsal, we could have avoided the problems that did occur.
Tell me about what works in a rehearsal. What are the preparation techniques that you find effective for going into a deposition?
It's up to the attorneys to figure out what's the worst question that you could screw up the answer to. And of course, it's not just one, but they know what the lawsuit is contingent on, and they should be really drilling down with all kinds of questions around the edges of where things most revolve around. They should also be beating you up because that's so important. They should be slapping you around, punching you in the face, depriving you of water and air, because that's the proper preparation for a deposition.
So mock depositions are useful to you. How about mock cross examinations?
I've never gone to trial.
Okay.
in 25, 30 years. I have had one. I did a briefing to a judge once. None of my cases have gone to trial.
How does that affect you as an expert witness? Do you set your prospective hours based on it probably going to settlement? How do you estimate how much time that you need to schedule to work on a case when it might go to settlement? In fact, when it probably will go to settlement.
I am a freelancer. You know, I work for myself. I'm a consultant. I've been doing that for many years. And so time is ephemeral, and it's something where you just have to be very, very flexible. And the good thing is you always know, well, I'm getting 10 more hours here, cha-ching, 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 even if those are going to be stressful hours. So I just try to work with the attorneys as best I can. I had to one last year. I was on vacation in Hawaii, and they were unforgiving about that. So from my Hawaiian beachfront hotel, there I am typing away and taking calls. So it can be stressful, but again, you're being well compensated.
How do you think you've been doing this for a while now? How do you think that the role of the expert has changed in the past couple decades? Has there been anything significant that has changed, be it technology or AI or anything like that, that has fundamentally changed the way that you approach expert witnessing?
It's a great question, and the answer is no. And it should be yes, right? I mean, in 30 years, things change, but the law. I mean, publishing is conservative. The law is extremely conservative. Things don't change a whole bunch. To have introduced Zoom into the process of law is not a fundamental change in what actually takes place. It's just a venue shift, and so I see it's the extreme seriousness with which you have to approach your work. You can never get sloppy, you can never get careless, and that's always been the case.
Have you done a good amount of Zoom depositions and just Zoom work in general, or remote work? Obviously, Zoom is just kind of shorthand for remote these days.
Yeah, yeah. Just a bit actually. The last few cases I've had have. I'm trying to think. Well, one of them didn't involve any face to face, so yes, I guess that was a Zoom case. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess that was my first one where there was no face to face. It wasn't a huge case, but um, yeah, I'm seeing that shift. What I'm mostly seeing is where it's a hybrid. Certain if the XYZ person is in Alaska, okay, we'll do the Zoom. If they're in Chicago, we can fly them in because face to face, certainly on a deposition, is far more effective.
Do you find that you need to change your demeanor or affectation or even your dress when you're appearing on camera rather than in person, or is it essentially the same?
I dress up. I dress up for school. I wear my Sunday best always to convey appropriate professionalism.
Do you have any stories about either depositions or certain engagements that have changed the way that you think about expert witnessing fundamentally, or changed the way that you prepare, or have been in some way an important milestone to the way that you act as an expert witness?
I guess I mean, again, a great question. There's this strange balance between factuality, let's call it, and legality. And some cases really do depend on certain facts being established and not rebutted successfully. But a lot of them, of course, come around, twist around these the angels on the head of a pin, and it's tough for the expert to anticipate how the angels are going to be dancing. And I find that a good rapport with the attorneys is really necessary to get their nuance and their depth of understanding around that. And with each case, I realize how little I know the law and how important it is to have great counsel working on your side.
Is it important that expert witnesses know the law even a little bit?
I, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, particularly when it comes to law. So I don't intend to study it in the evening.
uh, let's talk about that relationship between expert witnesses and attorneys. What makes for a good or even a great engagement? What makes that relationship between expert witness and attorney successful?
It's a delicate balance between the realization that this is a bunch of humans getting together. These are real relationships being formed, but there's an extreme degree of professionalism that's essential. And so I do like to keep in mind that, these people are not your friends exactly, but over a long engagement, and I've had some that go for years, and you get to know them, and you get to know a little bit about their families and their hobbies and their vacations and this and that. And I think it's important to allow that to happen, and let them get to know you as well. But at the same time, there has to be that restraint. You can never get too palsy, because that looks bad.
You said that sometimes you've had engagements go for years. On the flip side of that coin, have you had situations where you feel you just don't have enough time to fully process all the information that you're given, and your attorney needs a report by tomorrow?
That should have happened, but it actually hasn't. I've always had, even on the ones where, they do need, next Friday, I've been able to communicate whether I can do that, whether there are going to be some shortcomings as a result. But I'm usually able to bounce, one of my regular consulting gigs off to the side to devote myself completely to that case. So I've managed.
Have you had any negative experiences as an expert witness?
I guess what I find most galling is the horrid animosity that attorneys so often engender on the opposing side. And you get some nasty sons of to just, it's like, I'm a human being. What did you just say to me? What did you just do to try to demean me publicly in front of this small group? And you think, come on, this is a profession. We're all professionals here. There's no need for that kind of language. The attorneys on my side usually pick up on that, but they're being half the time, they're being similarly nasty. And I just, sometimes feel I've got to speak up and say, that's uncalled for, that's inappropriate. I'll be the one to judge what's inappropriate, blah, blah, blah. Say, okay, onward.
How do you mentally prepare for those sorts of things, for those eventualities that, frankly, I've heard from a lot of expert witnesses?
I bet. I mean, extreme preparation, it's so that they can't rattle you on your own, on what you know and what you're trying to express. And again, that's what, with the rehearsal. When I'm completely prepared, I'm not nervous. When I realize going into any kind of an assignment that I haven't done all my homework, then I can be easily rattled.
Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for expert witnesses, and in particular, newer expert witnesses?
The main thing that's, I suppose, been valuable to me is being registered with a number of different networks, because my work has come in from, I'm with, I don't know, 6 or 8 different networks, and I've had stuff come in from all over the place. And keeping your, resume up to date on each of those networks is important. It looks horrible if they see something that's a 4-year-old resume. So that's been the main sort of source of success. Let's say, if volume equals success.
Uh, that's interesting. With regard to your resume, are they typically publicly available, and do you harbor any concerns that anything that's written, you are obviously an extremely well published author, do you harbor any concerns that these things might be used against you to impeach your current opinion on something in the future? How do you keep track of your resumes and your articles and your blogs and your interviews and everything that you've ever done to make sure that you don't accidentally contradict something that you've ever said in your entire life?
I have been caught on that. I have been impeached on something that I wrote 12 years ago, kind of thing. And so, for again, the attorneys that I've worked with have been very good about going into the database and reading through what I've read. They ask me to highlight things that could be of concern, which I do, and I take a fairly broad view of what could be of concern, but that is a problem. I guess that's the other part of my advice. It's, you need to have a solid online presence to be a credible expert. Now, I've got a website, that I've put a lot of work into over multiple decades and continue to refine. I'm just in a redesign right now because that's what the first thing they're going to see. They're going to see your LinkedIn profile, and they're going to want to go to your website. And if that doesn't make them go, looks solid, well, you've lost the contest already.
Can AI assist in that sort of self-audit?
Good question. Haven't used it for that. I'm sure it could.
Thank you, Mr. McElroy, so much for joining me here today at the roundtable.
Thank you, Noah. You're a great questioner.
Thank you very much. And thank you to our guests for joining me for another discussion at the roundtable. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcast or your favorite listening apps.